Hello, and welcome to the Echo Effect podcast, where we share stories of exceptional practices that result in extraordinary results. The stories shared on the Echo Effect podcast are about positively impacting people. The guests on this show are those who are either the receivers or the givers of the positive impact or exceptional practice. And they're here to tell us their story, to inspire others and remind us that although sometimes we don't even recognize it or realize it, we are able to make a positive impact on others. It's called the Echo Effect. I am Elaine Simpson, your host of the Echo Effect podcast. And today I have Rickard, is founder and president of Voices in Advocacy. He's a successful speaker, trainer, consultant, and author. He and I are both on the board of directors for the National Speakers Association, Arizona chapter. In fact, he is the president-elect, and most importantly, my friend. Welcome and thank you, Roger, for joining me today on the Echo Effect.
Elaine, thank you. And I'm really glad you added the fact that we're friends, because I agree with that completely. You're a lovely lady who's doing great work. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you for joining us. So Roger, in your business, I'm sure that you have a plethora of stories that you could share with us about either being a catalyst in driving positive impacts or receiving it or witnessing it. So when you thought about today's show, what story or experiences came to mind that you want to share with us today?
Oh, I got plenty, and you should know that.
I do. Warning, he's a speaker, everybody. It could go long.
Now, I think first of all, people have to really understand what I do. And what I do for people is, in organizations, is I help them grow their advocates. So I take their community and I turn them into influential champions. And so with that, I inspire, engage, educate, and then activate people to be stronger advocates for whatever their cause is. And so whether it's like a nonprofit cause or something like Susan G. Komen, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or whether it's trade organizations or even corporate endeavors, I help people understand the principles behind how to be an advocate. So in my business, Elaine, there are a ton of things that have happened over the years. And when we first started talking about this podcast, it started getting me thinking over and over again. And I remember one particular short story is I was asked to come in DC and to meet with a trade organization. And they brought in 12 people around the country for me to talk to. And, as speakers, when you have a room of 2,000 people, that's one thing. When you're in a room of 12 people, it actually is much harder.
Oh, absolutely.
It is for me. And so you never know what will happen in that room. You don't know who you'll reach. You don't know how you'll reach them, what they'll grab onto, what they'll gravitate towards. And in this particular case, I got done with it. A guy came up and just said, "Can I have your card?" Didn't say another word to me. About 2 weeks later, I get an email. He asks if he can speak with me. I said, sure. We had a conversation. And during that conversation, he said, "You have inspired me to do something I have always wanted to do, but was chicken. I was afraid to do it. And you inspired me to run for public office." And I said, wow. That's great. George, I think that's fabulous. What are you going to run for? How are you going to run for it? What are you going to do? And so he did, and he won. And that just reminded me of countless times. I mean, I can think individual stories, one in Oregon, one in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but numerous people at different times have come up to me and said, "You made me believe that being a part of the government was a good thing to be." And in light of our current situation and in light of everything that's going on today, I think it's appropriate that we have found that there are a lot of people that aren't necessarily always in the limelight of government that have provided us great service, and we need to be grateful for the work that they do, often behind the scenes, and reminded that at every level of government, people have a vital role to play, from the mayors to county commissioners to town councils, up through Congress and governors and so on and so forth. So one of the things that happens a lot for me is that they seem to want to get in the arena. Teddy Roosevelt was famous, and by the way, Teddy's my cousin.
Oh,
yeah, which is really cool.
that's neat.
Yeah, but
We'll save that for another podcast.
yeah, really. I wish he and I could have some conversations, but at any rate, he talked often about being in the arena, and that if you're willing to be in the arena and do the work, and that arena changes depending on what someone's motivation is. And so I often go in, and I may be hired, let's say, by a trade association to come in and talk about how to be better advocates within that association for what they want you to do. And that is to advocate for their industry, to defend and protect their industry, and to speak to the issues that matter to all of them in their jobs and their daily lives. But the way I go about it and what I do often leads them to be thinking about the personal things in their lives and what they do. And it's gone from, sitting in an airplane having a conversation with a lady about what I do, to her coming back to me and writing me and then calling me and having a conversation about how she's going to start her own nonprofit organization to help support kids in a certain arena. And I don't want to necessarily portray individuals' confidences without their approval, but I got to tell you, at the end of the day, that's the thing that makes me do what I do, makes me proud of what I do, makes me happy. It's great to achieve all the end results for a client, but it's even much better to be able to have the individual people come to you and talk about things. And one that came to mind was a very good friend of mine who has constantly said that I have kind of mentored him up through the ranks in his industry and helped him along, was one of the casualties of COVID, not physically, but financially. Both he and his wife, within 2 days, were, he was completely furloughed and she was laid off, but what she does, it may be 6 months, a year or more, even before the possibility of her to get back to work. So now both of them are out of work, and I was talking to him as a friend. What can I do? How can I help you? You're strong, you need a recommendation. I'd be happy to do all that. And he said, well, that's good. Thanks. I'll call you if I need you. And about a week later, I get a text. Can you talk? Sure. He said, I want to thank you. I said, what did I do? And he said, you reminded me of all the advocacy tactics. I was getting nowhere with unemployment. I couldn't get through. I couldn't talk to people. The system was overwhelmed. I needed to get in as soon as possible because we had no income coming in. And so I decided to write my state legislators and my senator and the governor, and I got a text back from my state senator.
Wow.
Saying, I have put your name in. They will reach out to you within 24 hours. If they do not reach out to you in 24 hours, call my cell phone and I will deal with this directly and personally for you. And 24 hours went by. He didn't hear anything. So he called and he said to me, I really didn't expect that he would take my call. I left the voicemail. And I got a call back And he said, I will personally handle this, and by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, it'll be straightened out. And by 10 o'clock the next morning, it was straightened out. And so without getting into the tactics of what do you do, because that's not what this is all about.
Right.
The great thing was I never expected someone to use that to help them cut through the government clutter to get their unemployment benefits at this time of need. And so that was cool. That was neat.
That is awesome. I mean, that's the perfect example of not recognizing or realizing the impact. I mean, if he had not come back and told you, I mean, it's awesome that he came back and told you, which really just kind of drives home what you do and why you do it and why, we are in the circles that we are and such. But even if he hadn't done that, if he hadn't done that, you would never have known that you impacted him in that specific area so intensely. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast, is that there's so many opportunities that we do those things and we don't even get notified that anybody reaped the reward, so to speak, of that impact.
I called on a client once that I didn't think I knew at all. And I even had to have somebody introduce me because I didn't think I could get in the door to this person. When I got in the door and we had to begin the conversation, he said, the only reason I'm taking this call is I've seen you speak 4 or 5 times, and I really think you're the best at advocacy that's out there. And if you want to even work with us, that's pretty cool. Now that's a compliment.
Wow.
And it goes to the business side of things. But more importantly, it goes to, he never told me, didn't know who he was, didn't even know if he was in the room, had no clue. And he indicated that he knew who I was through those sources. So, just like chipping away at the David to create a great sculpture, the work that we do, we often don't see the end result because we're still chipping away at different things, and people are out there creating their own sculptures, doing their own thing.
That's awesome. So Roger, doing what you do is so unique. And how did you decide that this is, it's not a career that you just kind of fall into, but it's everything that we're talking about making an impact. That's what advocacy is. So, tell me how that happened.
Great question. Well, first of all, in my life, I've kind of considered I've had 2 pillars of my kind of professional life. And one has all been over in the, let's call this government / advocacy / politics area. And then the other was, I actually worked in the meetings and hospitality industry and travel industry in different aspects. Early 1990, well, two things. On the government, political, all that, my education's in political science. I worked in the Senate. I worked on a lot of campaigns. I worked on presidential campaigns and paid staff and so on and so forth. And at 18 and a half, because you always have to add that half when you're 18. And, now we reduce it by maybe a half a dozen years.
I would say half a century at this point, right? Go negative numbers at this point.
That's right. But at 18 and a half years old, I decided that I was going to run for public office because I had been involved in working on campaigns and doing all the legwork on campaigns from the time I was 13. Now, most people don't know this. I know you do. But at 6'8", and I was, I can tell you because when I was a sophomore in high school, I was 6'4".
Wow.
As a sophomore in high school. And so, at a young age, I was a pretty big guy. And so I was accepted as being older than I really was, which was kind of neat. And I just shut my mouth and kept doing my thing. But I got to know all these people and worked hard in their campaigns, celebrated with them when they won and sulked with them when they lost. And at 18 and a half, I decided I was going to run for a small public office in my hometown in Pennsylvania. I ran against a man who had been in office longer than I had been on earth. He had been reelected 11 times to 2-year terms, and he had been in office 22 years. And I decided to run against him, and I had no money. And I mean, like, okay, $60.
That's a lot of money to an 18-and-a-half-year-old, right?
And I took that $60 and I went out and I bought business cards with my name, and I was running and asking for their vote. And on the back, I put my phone number. And I'd go up and I'd knock on doors and I would say, "Hi, my name's Rickard and I'm running for," and, and I told him my age. And I said, oftentimes we think of the youth today as not being responsible. Well, I want to be responsible. I want to stay in the community. I want to help the community. And so I'm running. So now is your chance to prove that you're believing at least in one youth. And that was my stump speech. And I ask you to go vote for me. And I ask you that if you need a way to go vote, to call that number, and I'll come pick you up and I will take you to go vote. So at the end of the night, multiple precincts in the jurisdiction, no social media at the time. The fastest way to know the results were literally to have someone outside of the polling place when they were done counting, and they would put a piece of paper on the side of the wall of where the polling place was with the results. And so we drove around to all the precincts to get the results, and we're tallying it up, and it's dark and it's gloomy and it's raining, and we tally them up, and I think I won. Now I'm scared. I don't want to tell anybody who I won. I better go back and recount again. So I had my own recount. I went back. I went back through, and at the end of the night, I won by 5 votes.
Wow.
Now I don't attribute that to being a genius. I attribute that to doing what you're supposed to do. Did the hard work, went out, figured out kind of what in the business they call the A, B's, and C's. Who's the A voter? That's the person that never misses an election. The B voter that misses an odd election once in a while. And the C voter that usually votes at least 50% of the time. And I went through house by house, street by street, and went to the A's first. And they were my prospects.
Right.
And I went to the A's, and when I was done with the A's, I marked them off. I went to the B's, and then I went to the C's. And I kind of left no stone unturned. I did not go to a house that wasn't registered. I did not go to a house of somebody that voted once every 10 years. I wasn't going to waste my time. I was going to maximize my time. And the interesting and fun thing is I got reelected 2 years later, so they must have thought I did something right, either that or I scared them all off.
Well, you are a big guy, but
I'm not sure which, but so that got in my blood.
Right.
And then I went off and just kind of redirected things, got into life, got into making, money, taking care of building a young family and doing all that. In the early 1990s here in Arizona, there was, and I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona, there was an issue with the governor over the Martin Luther King Day holiday, and there were boycotts that were now taking place of telling people not to come to Arizona because a bunch of rednecks who were prejudiced. And without getting into the details, none of that was really true. It was a PR nightmare, but it was affecting a lot of people in their jobs. And I got very involved then in the trade industries about their need to help defend and protect the industry. And if it was going to happen in Arizona, it was going to happen elsewhere. And since then, we've seen it happen an awful lot in the meetings industry. Boycotts over gay marriage in different states, boycotts over bathroom issues of whether transgenders, do you have a unisex bathroom or not? And organizations deciding, well, we're going to boycott and not go there. So that's been a tool in that industry for quite a while. That got me more and more involved on government affairs committees, then chairing them. And then we tried to find someone to train our people to be advocates. And we went out and we did these searches, and we came up with the cheapest was about $38,000, and this was in 1994, so 26 years ago. Cheapest was $38,000 just to set it up. The most expensive was $485,000.
Holy cow.
And of course, we didn't have that money.
Of course not.
And so I said, well, let me do this. Let me create something. Let's create a couple focus groups. Let's see if they like it. Let's see if it's right. Let's see if it works. And then I proceeded to get a contract from that organization and did almost 300 events in the next three and a half years for them alone in training people how to be advocates. And so that's what led me into that. And I couldn't figure out how to make it a business alone. Still had my other businesses. And about 12 years ago, I just finally cut the cord and said, enough, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to expand my offerings to different industries. And voila, here I am. On with you on the Echo podcast.
Right. You are done. You have hit success. You are on the Echo Effect podcast.
You know,
you can now retire.
Most people are really concerned in this day and time of dealing with COVID-19 that nothing's happening in their life. And now I get to be on Elaine Simpson's show, the Echo Effect.
Yeah. So, Roger, you inspire me. I do a lot in affordable housing, as I think you know. And so I'm very involved with a lot of the issues that we have and such. And I can often think about the people that have made a positive impact on me and probably because of them, I've gone into and really focused a lot on affordable housing. Was there anybody in your life or past experiences that impacted you or influenced you in because of their way of doing business or their mentoring that encouraged you to do something like this?
If you think of a jigsaw puzzle, there are many pieces of the puzzle. And I'm where I'm at today because each piece of the puzzle was put there by somebody else. So I don't do this on my own. I have done this with help from so many people along the way. Big things, little things. I was involved in a community commerce group when I was young. And I used to have this habit of whatever I would say, I would end it with, okay. So Elaine, how's the podcast going? Okay. Answer a question. Okay. And the guy took me aside and he said, I'm going to tell you something and you're going to be mad at me, and I know you are. Told me what I did, told me to not be offended, told me to work to eliminate that. I will never forget what Dave did that day because it helped me along the way. Dave's an example of somebody a gazillion and a half years ago that influenced me that what comes out of your mouth is vitally important in how it gets communicated. I had political mentors, of course, along the way, people that taught me the do's and the people that taught me the don'ts.
Not intentionally.
And well, in some cases, they didn't really care.
Right.
But that would be for a different type of podcast.
Absolutely.
That we could get into. And I've had speaking mentors. And one that we jointly know, Ed, has always been a mentor to me, has always told me when I've done something that wasn't less than stellar, but he's always boosted me that I was better than I ever thought I was. And I run a lot of things by him. He gives me his input. I take it. And without those people, I wouldn't be, even close to where I'm at this point in time in my life and career. And that includes family.
Of course.
My father used to say to me, you always ask for advice, but you never take it. And I said, what makes you think that? And, and fortunately, he didn't have a really good example to give. Uh, but he said, every time you ask, I don't see you really doing that. And I said, well, Dad, let's put this into perspective. It's like the President of the United States has all these people in their life that provide them with advice. And ultimately, they have to make a decision. And they're going to tick some people off no matter what they do. Even though I asked for the advice, I may not do a 180-degree turn because of what you said, but I may recalculate in some aspect, whether it's a couple degrees or whether it's 45 degrees. I recalculate because I'm taking your perspective into account. And so when we often think that people don't hear us, when we often think that people don't listen, when we think that we didn't listen, there are things that funnel through the chamber of our brain that get back to us. They may bounce around a little bit and create that echo, but,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah. So yes, I've had a ton of mentors who have gone way out of their way to do things for me. And the thing that I attempt to do now is when someone calls or someone approaches me and asks if they can call or talk to me, and I always make time for them, to my detriment, personally sometimes, but I make time for them because people made time for me.
And that's what this echo effect is all about. Really, it is. And like I said at the beginning, being an advocate, you do this just naturally because of what you do. Is there any one person that you've given us a couple examples, but any one person that you feel that really had a pivoting point in their life based on something you said or did, and besides the gentleman that ran for office, but maybe more on a personal level, is there anybody that comes to mind, or a story?
I'm grateful that I've done a lot of work in 3 or 4 different industries, and in one of the particular industries, if you've been around for a while, you've probably seen me 15 times or more. At different settings of the industry. And it always amazes me the number of people that come up to me and will say to me, gee, I saw you 4 years ago, and then I went and started helping out with a soup kitchen. I started helping out with and I never told them to go do any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But what I told them and tried to teach them was that their actions could make a difference in someone else's life. You can be a champion for something. And I try to teach people that influence is too valuable to lose.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and wasted opportunities can never be replaced. And so with that, they have the opportunity to change somebody else's life. I was thrilled that when my son was in high school in a Jesuit prep school, they made them go down and work in soup kitchens for a week at a time.
Wow.
And he came back with a perspective that was wise beyond his years from spending time with those people.
Wow.
And that was really touching as he talked about nicknames that they gave him, how personable they were, how they wanted him to succeed, how they thanked him for doing what he did, and not just him, but everybody that was giving us something. And I often say that when you volunteer in some aspect, and whether that hand up is through education, whether that's a shoulder to cry on, an ear to listen with, it really just, it doesn't matter. And I think what you're doing with this podcast, Elaine, is vitally important at this time.
That's the point.
We've now recognized a whole new group of superheroes.
Gosh, yes.
Right? And those superheroes began when we were looking at New York and we were looking at the EMTs and the first responders and the nurses and the doctors and all the people dealing with everything directly. And now we realize that it's the bus drivers and that it's the people that keep our lives going, that have worked through all this. While some of us have been fortunate enough to be able to still be safe and be home, and they're out there risking themselves all the time in the current set of affairs that we're in. I hope that we will have a new spirit when we come out of this.
Yeah, I agree, Roger. And you've heard me say this before, the fact that we've gone back to kind of the old school things, the sidewalk chalk, the, kids jumping jump rope, reading, puzzles, family time together. I really hope, if anything good comes out of this, it's going to be that we've learned to really appreciate each other and our time together. And also, to your point, recognizing those everyday heroes that don't come to the front, that we don't see, walking across the stage or getting recognized on TV. It's the everyday janitors in the schools,
Correct.
That, identify a child that needs a hand up or a pat on the back. It's those people.
One of the things, I moved from the East Coast. I know you spend a lot of time in Michigan and split it in Arizona. One of the greatest things that you get when you come to Arizona in particular is it seems to be easier to talk to people. And the reason for that is that people have come from all over and have amalgamated in the community. And so it's not like there is a clique and a group of people that have known each other since elementary school.
Right.
That grow up and don't want anybody new in their circles. In a community like this, you meet people constantly that are brand new. I know you and I both like to play golf, and I love to then get paired with somebody new that I don't know. And by the time you walk off the golf course, you feel like you have a pretty good handle on who they are.
Absolutely.
Because of that. And I think as a society, a greater portion of us will react with more human kindness to people, more empathy. This is something that we hopefully will never see again in our lifetimes, in the lifetimes of our families.
Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting time. And when you were talking about the everyday heroes and things like that, I had a property manager who I've known in the industry for years, works in affordable housing. And she said, I'd love to do the podcast, but I really don't think I've really impacted anybody. I'm like, oh, you have more than you know. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to start this, is because I want people to recognize that they do make an impact. And it's usually they don't recognize it until you start asking questions and asking them specifically to give us an example of something. And then the light bulb pops and they're like, oh, wow, I did make a difference. And, like I said earlier, you have plenty of stories because of what you do and who you are. And, I look up to you, literally. And I am 5'4" on a really good day. Most people don't even know that because I'm wearing heels most of the time.
But you have nice heels.
Right. You know what? I haven't worn a pair of heels since this whole COVID started. Not sure I'm going to be able to again, but
exactly.
It's been a pleasure with you, Roger. Is there anything, and you've been speaking some incredible messages, is there anything you would like to share?
Don't be afraid to speak out in support of things. I often teach people that the word advocacy is arguing in favor of something. It's not disagreeing with something. So to be a great champion advocate, you argue for things. And you are supportive in the things that you do. I ask everybody to be an advocate one way or the other, whether that's advocating for your family, your children, your loved ones, for friends, for your community, for your industry, for humankind. We are all in this every day together. We hear that a lot right now, but we've always been in it together.
Right.
This
Yeah.
really hasn't changed. Perspective, I think, has changed. And so I ask people to go out, be a member of the choir, protect those that are vulnerable, protect those that are less fortunate, work to advance society, and echo that through everything that you do.
Nicely put, Roger. Thank you so much.
Oh, this
Really
was fun.
appreciate it. Oh, yeah. I mean, the sad thing is we could go on for hours. It's not a sad
folks,
thing.
we may someday over a beverage of choice.
Of course. So, but Roger, it's been a pleasure, and you are truly an inspiration. And thank you for everything and being my friend. And looking forward to serving on the board next year with you.
Well, it's fun, and for those that don't really, let me say this: for those that know Elaine, know what an incredible woman she is, and know how giving and caring she is. She's got her own stories of what she's been doing for people lately, and one young lady in particular that we know about. I'm proud of you. I'm glad to be with you. I want you to work with us on the board. I asked you to do that, and I am thrilled that you have accepted that. You bring a lot to the table.
Okay, now you're going to make me cry. Thank you.
I tried.
Just kidding. You were working really hard on it, aren't you?
I needed that Barbara Walters question, but I couldn't. I just couldn't find it.
Oh, well, maybe next time, Roger.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for those of you that have joined us today, if you are interested in telling your story, sharing your story, and causing the echo effect, please email Brandy Bean at B as in boy, E, A as in apple, N as in Nancy, E at yourechoeffect.com to schedule your interview today.